right. Good morning, Dr. Richards. And
Morning.
it's morning this time, so we're both have a busy day. So we're up early, up and at 'em.
Bright and early.
Congratulations, bright and early. Congratulations are in order for your Festivus victory yesterday.
Really big win. Yeah, really pumped about it. First competition. I've got my medal actually sitting around here somewhere.
Yeah, it's awesome. You'll find as you get older, any medal is a big deal.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that the other day. Someone was mentioning like the participation trophy and how I think sometimes participation trophies get a bad rap, especially as you're like out of competition and competing in anything as you get older, even if it's just for fun. Like a participation trophy is actually just saying at least you're doing something, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think you won, so any victory is valuable.
Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, we got a medal, a bar of soap, and then a shaker cup, and that was it. It
That's
was a
amazing.
good, yeah, it was great. But no, it was a really good time. It was my first kind of CrossFit type competition that I've done. We'll probably do more. A lot more sitting around than I anticipated. Kind of felt like I used to swim growing up, and it was like you swim for 3 minutes every 2 or 3 hours,
Right.
and that was pretty much the equivalent of this. But it was a good time. A lot of caffeine intake, which like wasn't actually needed, because I was thinking, I'm like, well, in the grand scheme of things, I actually worked out today for under 30 minutes, but I'm acting like I competed in the CrossFit Games and did 5 events. But yeah, no, it was a really good time. We'll definitely be doing it again, and good turnout down at Fearless Athletics in Philly.
Nice. That's a great place.
Yeah, it was great. So yeah, it was really fun, but I think we're due for a quick catch up here on your training for powerlifting. Sounds like something not too great went down.
Yeah, last rep I was planning on doing to just see where I was at with bench, and definitely a grade 1 to grade 2 strain in my right pec. So I might be out for bench press, but hopefully I can still get some back squatting and some deadlifting in. I was feeling good, and then that's shit happens, I guess. Last rep frustrated a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. Still plan on being there on Saturday, and it's part of the participation trophy idea. I wasn't planning on winning anyway, but I wanted to be at my best, and I'm certainly not going to be.
Yeah,
that's how it goes.
I think the squat's the most exciting one anyway, because it's like it's the first one, everyone's there, and you actually face the crowd, versus bench, no one can see you anyway because you're like tucked down. And I didn't have the patience last year to actually stay for all the deadlifts. So at the meet you're going to be at, but
yeah, I'm excited about that. I mean, to be honest with just the training process is already giving me more strength with at least the squat than I've ever had. So I never really went through a process of just trying to go heavy with the squat. There's always like the logistics of training without a spotter. With squatting, I never really pushed. I actually never wore a weightlifting belt. I mean, I've always done that for deadlifting, and it was very obvious how much more weight you can lift when you do that. So it's the first time I actually started messing with that with back squats, and it's quite a bit different. So I already feel like I had benefit in the training process. Same thing for bench press. I hadn't done much of that since my college days, and it was just nice to get back into the mix. And unfortunate that my last rep, I was feeling pretty good with that too, and just did not feel good. That one rep, you just know you did something that it's gonna be hard to come back from in the amount of time I have left. But yeah, we'll see.
You'll make up for it in the other two.
Yeah, I hope so. I think once the adrenaline kicks in, I won't be feeling much. But I don't think I'll have anything for the bench. I'm probably gonna bow out there.
Yeah. Oh, so frustrating on that last one.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. So today we're gonna dive back into our discussion about longevity-based movements. Last week or 2 weeks ago now, we took a hiatus. We were talking about getting up and down off the ground. Now we're going to talk about squatting. This, depending on how it goes today, this might be another 2-parter, because there's a lot to be said for squatting, a lot of misconceptions, also a lot of utility. I know the both of us use the squat quite a bit in many different ways, and the research also talks about squatting from many different angles. for its benefit. So I think, we'll dive right in and just kind of talk about how do you use squatting clinically, and how do you think about it maybe from several different avenues.
I think a squat's one of the first things I look at with almost any client, but like more specifically if they're a physical therapy client, always looking at it for anyone having probably low back or even mid back and below complaints. I mean, we'll definitely probably look at it at some point for someone with a upper body thing, just by like getting them into a certain position for a certain movement, but it's not the beginning of my assessment process. But yeah, anyone lower body, just want to see a deep squat, supported and unsupported, can see what they can tolerate, where they're feeling discomfort, with the caveat being like someone who's post-op or really flared up to the point that they actually can hardly bend, and then it becomes okay, well, that's one of the first goals is to actually get you squatting.
Right.
Just because it covers such a large range of motion, it involves a lot of joints, and from a longevity perspective, which you can probably talk more about, it is kind of a bridge to getting up and down off the ground. It's at least like this idea of changing levels, which I think is really important in longevity, but also sports performance as well. So even with athletes, being able to actually sink low is going to be something that's important for performance. If you're thinking about getting into and out of a cut, usually the better athletes are the one who are able to get a little bit lower and create more displacement of their center of mass. But yeah, that's generally what I'm looking at first, and then like to load it at some point, and that's an assessment in itself, and probably tells more almost, or just tells different information than a body weight squat, or a supported squat unto itself. But how are you using it in your assessment process and in terms of longevity, and then also, yeah, very, very clinically as well?
Yeah, I think there's two categories to look at with the squat. From what we do from an assessment standpoint, there's the biomechanics of it that you could really get in the weeds about what you can see if you have a good eye for looking at movement from just one squat. Like how does somebody squat naturally? Like what's their body able to do pretty easily versus how do you have to give them assistance? Where are they limited, right? So you can get a lot just from a biomechanics standpoint by looking at a bodyweight squat. From a standpoint of looking at function, though, there is just understanding what a squat is, can really be quite useful to clean up some misconceptions, right? So we use the term squatting, and some people will go immediately to like a power lift, a back squat, something that's an exercise. But we could also just be thinking about squatting as this segue from working from the ground to standing, or getting up and down from a chair, getting up from a low seat. So it's important that we have different distinctions on how we're looking at the squat and understanding it's all one big continuum, and we have to see where people are when they come in. A lot of times there's a lot of fear around the word squat, just because someone has knee pain coming in and you say the word squat and you have to be careful. So you have to call it something else. Let's just have you get up and down from this chair here. Or you got to put somebody in a position where they really, really feel supported so that they can even start to assess the squat there. But from a research standpoint on longevity, the way that squats are often looked is you have the category of leg strength and power. So separating that out from squatting, just in general, having more leg strength and leg power is associated with longer life. Hands down, it's pretty clear that that's the case. And then if you go even deeper into that research, if you look at the movements, the exercises that tend to promote the most leg strength and power, loaded or resisted back squats tend to be one of the most valuable exercises when they compare it to other exercises. So it's just a nice bang for your buck if you're looking at the value of leg strength and power. If you can get people to squat safely with load, it's one of the most efficient ways to get that goal. But then the other side of the longevity piece is that you could just look at the ability to lower your level quicker and faster allows you to fall safer. So that's a whole line of research too, where it's, fall prevention, frailty prevention is a terminology I've seen in the research, where you're just looking at, if you can lose your balance for a second and quickly lower your level because you're used to being able to get down into a deep squat, your butt is now closer to the ground, your body gets smaller quicker, you're less likely to fall in a catastrophic way. And falling in a catastrophic way later in life is, a big time marker for the opposite of longevity, or taking some years off of your life. So being able to fall gracefully is goes hand in hand with being able to squat well, because it comes naturally. And I know I'm doing jujitsu now, and so much of jujitsu just, you don't even think about it after a while, but you're on the ground and you're always segueing up and down from the ground into these different positions. But getting your body into variations of the squat pattern, it gives you base, it gives you posture, but it also is something you'll naturally do if you lose your balance and have to go to the ground. It's how you learn break falls. You lower your level and then you actually fall to the ground. So it's just something, you don't think of it as a squat, but you just think of it as, it's certainly, if you break it down, a deep squat is part of falling with grace. So that's like the broad categorization there for what you're looking at with longevity. And then also, we know that we could be used for athletic performance and for power and strength development.
So in your assessment process, you're kind of evaluating both sides of that, like the longevity piece, or well, I guess, the biomechanics piece, and then also the strength, power, kind of controlled fall pieces to that as well.
Yeah, and it depends on where people are in that process. So I guess the point there is, if you have somebody who comes in, I see a lot of clients that they're nowhere near, being an athlete, or they're far from that, and they don't have any goals to be an athlete. Most of the time they're coming in with some type of injury history, and they're more fearful of the idea of squatting. So I have to still, there's still value in that, even though I'm not going to be working towards building any type of athletic performance. I have to explain and somehow get people into this continuum of still building leg strength and power, and still having this value of being able to lower their level over time. So again, it becomes a conversation of, what are you ready for? But this squat pattern, even if I'm not going to use that terminology early on, still needs to be in the program somewhere. And then I could look at it from, again, what they're ready for, and then what do they do naturally when you start to get somebody to squat for the first time. So a lot of times I will use the just get up and down from the chair as an assessment, and you can see a lot from that, right? So because you could set the chair wherever that person is already sitting, right? So a lot of times people come in and they're going to pick a chair. You might give them a chair that you have in the clinic, or you may know that, okay, they have knee problems, so I'm going to actually give them a more elevated chair than they would get used to. But you could see right from that assessment, just let me have you stand up and sit down 5 times. What do they do naturally? And then as we start lowering the level, you can see where compensations come in. So, there's archetypes that we both are familiar with, that, you have some people that they'll squat straight down. They have a nice vertical squat, and they may be able to sit at the bottom of the squat, no problem, but have very little strength in the middle of the squat. Or they'll take some type of route where their butt goes back, their head goes forward when they're in the middle of the squat, but then they can sit down and hamstrings and calves are touching at the bottom. And then you got people that, you go down to a quarter squat and their knees are caving in, and they're already complaining of knee pain, their bodies are shifting forward, right? You could tell a lot from there. You don't necessarily have to adjust it right away, but you just get a sense of, okay, this is going to be things that we're going to have to address down the line, but we have to just see what people are ready for, where they're starting.
Right. And for, those people, I guess just thinking about the different archetypes, I feel like there's that side. And then you also have the side that's like, maybe at least what I see a lot of are people that are obviously we have slightly different populations, I think. So it's cool to talk about both sides of it. And I think what I see most often is people who actually strength wise are fine, but then biomechanics wise just can't sit below parallel, like just can't get there. And then so it becomes first actually trying to help them be able to get below parallel comfortably, whether it's a supported position, kind of like you're talking about, um, or I guess it's supported too if you give them some type of anterior load or a heel lift, which both just kind of tend to help people sink a little lower. But then actually, interestingly enough, it's like they tend to actually not have a lot of strength there. So when we're able to start loading it up, it's like compared to what they're used to squatting, say in a front squat or some sort of loaded squat, it's a lot more difficult. It's just interesting to see sort of the exposure of that weakness, because I think people a lot of times think about in the elderly more that, people are going to have difficulty squatting to depth. But I think there's a lot of things that can be exposed in a younger, more athletic population as well. That leaves just room for opportunity. But going back a little bit to what you were talking about, getting people up and down off a chair 5 times, off various levels. I think what's so helpful about that too is it's backed up in the research, and there's standardizations like the 5 times sit to stand test, and that has a specific height and specific norms that you're trying to hit. But I think that's really helpful, especially as people age, to actually compare them to norms for potential falls risk, things like that. Like you were saying before, actually being able to control your falls, go with it to a certain extent and then resist it, is a really big part of longevity. And then there's the times get up and go test as well, which is get up from a chair, walk, what is it, 5 meters or something, 10 feet.
I think it's 10 feet, yeah.
10 feet, and then get back to the chair and sit down. So I think it's all these things just tie back to the research. But how often are you using like those specific research back tests in your clinical reasoning, versus how much are you looking more objectively and just kind of comparing to their starting place and where they're at down the road?
I think it's actually a good discussion point for people that are a little bit fearful of squatting, to pull from. It's actually like the CDC's. They do some research on it, but it's their standard for looking at how to keep people safe and prevent falls later in life. I think it's called the STEADI, which I'd have to look. I could put this in the show notes of what the STEADI actually stands for, STEADI. But it's an acronym for that, is for basically preventing falls later in life. So yeah, I could give people at least that information to say, yeah, this is coming from, the CDC, depending on what they believe in organizations nowadays. But it gives them some type of standard to say, like, this is important right now. This has nothing to do with powerlifting. It's just you getting up and down faster, being able to walk faster. So, a lot of times people are appreciative that they're losing some speed with gait. So, the timed up and go test, for it works squatting and gait speed together in the assessment. So I might do it as a specific, stopwatch test once or twice. And sometimes that becomes fun for individuals that they actually like the idea of competing with themselves and looking at, how many times did I go back and forth in this certain amount of time. I don't know that I'll always keep it to the specific standards of the test. I might do that once or twice just to show people where they are. But it is something that it's a great discussion point for those that are fearful of squatting. And then the 30-second chair rise test is another one. I use some version of that often, actually, where but I'm oftentimes bring the count down to like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, to try to stay within that kind of creatine phosphagen phase for people that like don't ever think about going fast as something that is part of their training, or they may think it's unsafe to move fast. But I think it might be counterintuitive, but as soon as you start to think about it, it's like that's the thing you're going to lose as you age. You need some speed in your training, and one of the best ways to do that is to just say get up and down as quickly as you can. Make it easier than you think. So if the standard for the test is like a 16-inch chair, I may have them do like an 18-inch, or just like if there's any type of pain that they have to work around, I make it easier, so they get the sense of going fast more than having it be specific to the test. So I use that quite a bit for clients that are, I don't want to use the word elderly, but just more fearful, right? Because age doesn't matter. I have some people that are 70 plus that are just killers. You know what I mean? They're doing hundreds of pounds, like they're doing kettlebells as heavy as we can go with squats. So it's really just dependent on what people are coming from and their apprehension to the movement, is when I'll start people there. But I do use that a lot. And to speak to what you were talking about though, with the different archetypes of the sort of mobile squat versus the someone who's got a lot of strength but has a hard time getting down into the bottom of the squat. I think those are good archetypes to look at from just the standpoint of like, what bucket am I going to put this person in?
Yeah.
And like, who are you in that person's life? Are you their coach to actually get their leg strength and their power to be optimized for sport, or are you their physical therapist that it might be working on the things, giving them more options for movement, like working on the things that they don't currently have? Because you usually have one or the other. It's rare that you have a person that has perfect mobility and then is optimal under load in that mid range. And that's the nice thing about the squat pattern. It's such a full range of motion when you take it to its endpoint, that you could really see there's something going on at the top of the squat, there's something that's different going on in the middle of the squat, and then there's something that's completely different biomechanically that goes on at the bottom of the squat. And you really can put people where they need to be, and everyone's got a weakness and everyone's got a strength within the squat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just jumping back real quick to what you were saying about using 30-second chair rise tests, or breaking it down even to 10-12 seconds. I just think using a timer for anyone is one of the most useful things in terms of getting people to move faster. Because I feel like it's always like, okay, can you try to move a little bit faster? And then, without that external feedback of actually knowing how quickly you're going, it's like you're not getting anywhere. And then I think people surprise themselves a lot when it's like, all right, well, you just did whatever it is, 10 squats in 12 seconds. Or that's pretty fast, but say, whatever objective number, like, do you think you can beat that? And then it's just, I think it's fun too, because it gives a little bit of competition, brings a little competition into training. For I think a lot of people don't have much of that in their life after potentially high school. And I mean, even for me yesterday, like competing in the Festivus games, that was the first CrossFit competition I've done, but other than Summer League 2 years ago, that's the first competition I've done recently. So I think it's just being able to bleed a little bit of that into training or even physical therapy, because we know those exist along a spectrum, is just so important for health and also performance.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like just giving people some objective things to consistently see change with, I think is so valuable. And it also just, we have these definitions in our head of, what does it mean to be strong? What does it mean to be powerful? What does it mean to be fast? What does it mean to have endurance? But, the people that aren't in the field, they don't think in those terms, right?
Right.
So a lot of times you have to actually practically give objective information to see, and then, connect that to maybe a definition. It's like, we're trying to make you a little bit faster. And if we say that without giving a practical thing that somebody feels safe with to see them get faster, they might just tie that term faster into, I can't go fast right now. Like, I don't feel safe going fast right now. So just having like a timer doesn't matter how fast you go right now. You are working on getting faster, right? You're in that process of getting faster. And then this is the goal. It's just each time we go as fast as you can, but it might be a little bit faster. And before you know it, that apprehension sort of melts away, and it's more excitement about trying to do a little bit better each time, right? And it's the same thing with strength, where you start people too easy with weight, but you just start to show them that they can do a little bit more weight each time, and that is them getting stronger objectively, right? So it's sort of taking these definitions that we have and then making them practical in the moment for an individual, that I think helps to melt some of that apprehension away.
How do you talk to your patients or clients who are scared about, I mean, this is squatting, but applies to, it can be extrapolated to any movement, but due to a past injury or nocebos or like negative beliefs that they've been told by others about a certain movement. So in this case, a squat. Like, how do you kind of talk to them about that, to maybe potentially start to break down some barriers or apprehension surrounding the movement?
Well, so with the squat specifically, again, I'll just start them with something that they're already doing, like, getting up and down from the chair, and then I want to know, does anything hurt in the moment of doing it? So, my first goal is to be able to take whatever their complaint is and be able to actually reproduce it, and then show them a way that they can do it without the pain. Right. So maybe that is just make it easier by, elevating a squat. So don't go as low. All right. So this is where you can be right now. So we can actually train here, and get you stronger here. And then eventually we'll bring you back down to, where you were, where the symptom was coming on. And hopefully because you've gotten stronger now, the symptom won't be there. But it's giving them some sense of control. It's not an idea of like that the pain is there all the time. And I think that's actually when you ask somebody the question of like, what brings the pain on it? What part of the movement do you feel the pain? Sometimes that actually hasn't been thought through. So it's just, it hurts all the time. My knees always hurt. Like, all right, let's prove that to be true or false. And, and so I usually ask the question, do your knees hurt right now? And if they do, what's the level of pain? So maybe you get an objective number like 0 out of 10, or it's just like, okay, have in your head a certain baseline for what your legs feel like now. And then I want to find out if the actions that I ask you to do, so if we're talking about squatting or getting up and down from a chair, does it hurt more than your baseline right now? So you have to be able to separate that out. Like, is the thing that you're afraid of actually producing more pain in the moment? So this discussion of the fear actually gets connected to the movements that they're apprehensive with. And usually we can find a starting point that is not, fear producing. And again, I think the squat's actually easier than you think, because people are already doing that all the time in some version of just like every time you get up from the chair. But that might actually be the subjective complaint. It's like every time I've been sitting for a while and I go to stand up, that's when I feel my knee, that's when I feel my back, that's when it hurts. But then we have to break that down. Does it matter the chair? Does it matter, how long you've been sitting for? So we have that discussion that there's actually more to know around, what's producing the symptom. There's more to discuss than it just hurts, to do some type of squat. It just hurts to get up. But there actually might be more context that we can manipulate and give you control with to get you to actually train, and try to build some strength and some endurance and some of the attributes you would need to make this less painful over time.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll see too with people where they actually say they have knee pain, but they actually don't experience it during a squat. Mm-hmm. But you also find they're objectively weak, and then looking, quote, weak, compared to, where their performance potentially should be at relative to other benchmarks that you're finding in their evaluation. But also it's a little shaky, and this could apply to like, and again, any other movement, but then it becomes kind of a discussion, I think, of like, hey, okay, you don't have any discomfort during this, but I would think that actually being able to improve this is going to be pretty important for improving, your knee pain.
Right.
And the fact that we're able to actually do this without discomfort means this is going to be a pretty big thing that we can start to train, to kind of actually create physiological changes in the tissue without flaring things up. But I think sometimes when people don't have pain during it and then they don't see it initially as like, well, how is this connected to what I have? It doesn't hurt. I think in either case, just connecting the dots is probably the thing that makes people buy into training, and then do commit in the way that they need to commit to see the change they want to see.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and I think it becomes this scenario where you have to just have people find the squat, the movement that is for them, and it's going to oftentimes look very different than what they thought of it in their head. So like you start to give them a squat variation that's like, oh, it's like a light bulb goes on. This feels safe. This feels easy, right? So you give somebody a box squat that is higher than they're used to sitting, and it doesn't hurt, and you can actually increase the challenge by having within that that safe environment, by having them go faster, by having them do some weight there, and they feel good training there because you just gave them some safety. I use wall squats a lot just because I think some people really like they struggle in that midpoint, and you're using the wall to try to give them some verticality of like head over shoulders over torso with the feedback from the wall. And that feels like a point of safety. I've had several people say that I really like this squat, but like anytime you try to do it without that wall support, there's knee pain, there's some apprehension there. But it's just like, okay, that's your squat that we can actually challenge and we can progress with. And I think that becomes really valuable to find the squat for the person that maybe you have to work on more cautiously, the thing that they don't want to do that they're more fearful of, but also find the squat for them that they feel like they could really progress well and they feel safe with. So that there's going to be all different squats for different people, but the kind of basic idea is that you're trying to lower your level over time, and then you find what's the weak point within the movement for the individual, and you build that up, and hopefully the two sides come together. The side that they're apprehensive with starts to get a little bit better, and they get a little less apprehensive there, but then they're also getting stronger quicker because we found something that they can do and they don't have to be as fearful of.
Absolutely.
All right. I think that's a good place to stop for today, but I think I want to come back next week and talk a little bit more about the biomechanical aspect of it. Maybe get it into the weeds a little bit clinically about the difference between counter nutation and nutation, like a hingy squat versus a more knees forward squat. We can talk about some of the the current trends of like knees over toes and how that's really shouldn't be a trend, but it's just bad advice in the long run. And now, people have realized it's bad advice, so they're making a career off of it. But, we could talk about the difference there, and, maybe even dive deeper into specific injuries that are, that come about during squatting and how we look differently if it's a knee problem versus a back problem versus an ankle problem, et cetera. So I think we'll let this be part one, and next week we'll touch on some of that, and we'll keep going deeper with this topic.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, you enjoy your Sunday.
I will. You do the same.